This is an interview by Roland Matthies of Elwood Pitzer, and the date is right at the end of April, April 27, 1999. We're going to interview him on behalf of Clark County Historical Society for the archives, meaning that this will go into the permanent records both on tape and in transposition. I'm Roland Matthies. Okay, Elwood, you're on. How did you happen?
Well, that I do not know. But I was born in Springfield, 1910. I was the son of John W. and Nell Pitzer. I did have one sister, the name of Esther Berry. She just passed away here a week ago. I matriculated in the Springfield public school system, attending Washington School, Schaefer Junior High School, and Springfield High School. Then I went to Wittenberg University in 1931. 1930. Well, Betty says 1930. She's the one I always turn to in these situations. And played in sports at Springfield High School. Played basketball at Wittenberg University, achieving such honors as honorable mention, All-American. Played basketball and baseball at Wittenberg. Had the wonderful opportunity to sign a minor league baseball contract with the Cincinnati Reds in 1933, and then I was sent to the minor league ball clubs.
Where did you start out?
Well, I signed a contract with Cincinnati, and then I played in the Mid-Atlantic League, played in the Western Association League, played at Norfolk for a short period of time. Then I played at Bartlesville, Oklahoma for 2 years, and then my contract was sold to Galveston of the Texas League. Now at this particular time I decided not to continue my athletic career in baseball and decided to get married. However, let me say this. I had the good fortune of playing in the National Basketball Conference, which is now known as the NBA. Played there 4 years, and then I decided to get married and go into coaching. In those days, you had to have spent 2 years at a junior high school before you could go into a senior high school. I went to Schaefer Junior High School here in Springfield and coached there for 2 years, and then was elevated up to the position of basketball coach and a teacher at South High School.
Let me interrupt. What was your class year for Wittenberg graduation?
Mine was 35, and the reason for that was that I'd go and withdraw in the spring term because I went out to play baseball. Spring training. And
what positions did you play in baseball?
Played third base and outfield. Wonderful experience. Met up with a lot of nice people.
How many years?
There were some particular ones that you did not particularly care for, but that's life.
So how many years was it?
4 years basketball and 4 years in baseball.
Uh-huh.
I played with Columbus in the National Basketball Conference, like I say, which was at that time the origination of the NBC, which is now the NBA. We were the beginners of it.
Had you graduated from Wittenberg before you did this, or did
no,
you have to drop out?
I had to come back and do my work, finish up, which was all right with me. That's what I went to school for. Get an education, get a diploma, but a wonderful experience.
So you decided you wanted to get married. When?
Well, we got married in 1936. I had gone with Betty in high school, started as a junior in high school, went to Wittenberg, she went to Wittenberg. So I would say we've had a lot of good years together.
Did you have a particular experience at Wittenberg, such as fraternity, or?
I was a member of the Phi Gamma Delta fraternity at Wittenberg. I was Boost W president while there, and was chosen as one of the top 10 on campus when I was in school. I don't know what else I could tell you of my career. I mean, I've been a very fortunate individual. I've always had some wonderful young men under me in my teaching profession, coaching work. Many of my youngsters have gone on to become very successful. Some that you would remember was like Bill Getman.
Yeah.
Don Dijon went to Denison. Bob Bronson went to Miami. Jack Slee went to University of Dayton. Oh, I've had so many that have gone on to become very successful in their fields. Very successful. I know a man the other day wanted to know as to what particular basketball player I would choose as the most outstanding. That I can't do.
Yeah.
That I can't do. I know they'd like for me to say this one or that one, but
it's hard.
That's hard to do.
Yeah.
And I also had I guess I was coaching baseball at Wittenberg when you were over there then. I coached baseball at Wittenberg for 2 years under Van Wy, who was the athletic director at that time.
Yep, I remember.
You remember that? Our superintendent of schools, Mr. Holt, at that time,
Ed Holt, yeah.
called me in and said, Elwood, he said, I understand that you're coaching baseball at Wittenberg. I said, I am. He said, well, he said, next year, he said, I think maybe you better start with our school system. So he laid it on the line. So I figured that I'd just get out of it entirely and not coach the high school team anymore than coach my alma mater, Wittenberg.
So what did you do?
Well, I just gave it up. Just gave it up. I liked it at Wittenberg. The fellows were older naturally. A number of them had been in the service, so we had a lot to talk about at that time. But my wife could tell you more about me than I know myself.
Well, what got you started on the whole idea of going into athletics? About what time in your life?
I started when I was as a kid going to Washington School. I had a wonderful teacher there by the name of Fearball. And I was always out on the playground trying to shoot baskets. So she said I should continue my education. I came from a family in which my mother and father were not high school or college graduates, but both mother and dad were wonderful, wonderful people. But she inspired me to continue on, and I remember a fellow once telling me there at Washington School, I've never forgotten this, and maybe he's the one I should get credit to. His name was Lynch. I don't remember his first name, but I remember his last name was Lynch. And he said one day when I was trying to get the ball in the basket there at school, that I'd never make a basketball player. I was such a skinny kid, as you say, a runt. But maybe that was the stimulus that I needed, because that's what made me start. And it turned out to be a great career.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my junior high school coach was a fellow that was a graduate of Denison University by the name of Botkins. Red Botkins. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. And he, in turn, kept insisting that I continue my high school work and go to college. But now, here I am, going on 89, and I can look back and think of all the wonderful years that I've had in sports. But it's been good.
Charlie Fox was pushed in high school.
Oh yeah, Charlie Fox. You knew Charlie Fox?
Yeah.
He liked me very much, and inspired me to continue with my education. I didn't have any desire to want to go on to school. You can understand that from a background like I had, but it paid off. Paid off. There she is, right there.
We used to shoot baskets with him every minute, I know that. We used to shoot baskets with Mr. Fox in the gymnasium at noontime each day.
Yeah, we'd go in the gymnasium at noontime, and Mr. Fox, he was the principal at the high school at that time, and we'd shoot baskets at noontime.
Mm-hmm.
He treated me wonderful.
Colonel Morris, too, and you played an awful lot of tennis.
Oh, I played an awful lot of tennis when I was younger. And I started down in Lagunda, at St. Bernard's School there. And Father Cale and Father Walsh inspired me to take up tennis, which I did too. Excuse me. And I played in a number of tournaments, but I remember Earl Morris, who was a Wittenberg graduate. I could never defeat him. he was very, very good.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that he came to me and said, let's go to Kalamazoo, Michigan, and play in the National Junior Championships. Well, Earl Morris's father had died, and Earl was living with his mother, naturally. But I didn't have money enough to go to Kalamazoo, but Earl went. His mother sent him every place to play in tournaments. But Earl went, came back. I said, how'd you do? He said, I won one match. He said, all the others were in favor of my opponents. 6-0, 6-1.
Wow.
But Earl was a wonderful, wonderful fellow.
Well, he was a track man too, wasn't he?
Yes,
Wasn't he a runner?
he was.
To the best of my knowledge, I don't ever remember of his being out there. I was out there and ran hurdles, pole vault, broad jump. But I don't ever remember Earl Morris being a trackman, although he could have been. I mean,
I recall when he was chairman of the board at Wittenberg, how he pushed for a better track constantly. After us,
is that right?
spend some money and get us a new track, and we finally got it.
Well,
It may have been a different year because he had to leave in spring when he actually signed your baseball contract.
yeah, but I don't remember. But he could have. He could have. He was a wonderful tennis player.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very good. I have not mentioned anything about my artwork. But,
What year did you finish your coaching?
Oh, you mean
Oh,
coaching?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd say that was
basketball, 53.
about 3,
53.
about 53, about 3.
2 years after I went to state championship.
I had a little breakdown at that time, so I had to give it up.
Did you retire entirely at that time?
Oh, no, I continued on their staff at Springfield
You
High
were
School.
coaching baseball.
I coached baseball up there, but what I was going to say is that I also taught sculpture at Springfield South High School. I had attended State Art Institute for sculpture, and so like I say, I continue with my artwork for some time, but I do very little artwork anymore. I should take it up again, I guess, but my wife says, when are you going to go down to the Center for Art?
Uh-huh.
But I just don't do it.
Well, I've been retired for 24 years, and I was going to go back and attend classes at Wittenberg just for the fun of it, and I never have.
Been too busy, though.
Yes, you've been a very successful businessman, that's for sure. That's for sure.
Okay, tell me something about what you felt the conduct of students was on which you think you could put a finger as to what's wrong today. What's accounting for all of this mess that we're in today with deportment?
Well, I tell you, I have no answer for that. I have no answer for that whatsoever. In other words, I've been sitting here a few days listening to these PhDs, doctors, psychiatrists, so forth. I think there's only one solution to it, and that is a better home life. A better home life. We just don't have any communication between the teachers and the homes. Now, when I was younger, going to Washington School there, they had a Parent Teachers Association, and I know my mother would always go to the meetings and attend the meetings and so forth, and we had a good relationship between the home and the school at that time. But we don't have enough relationship between the home and the school. We just don't have it. I know at North High School we have open house. Your mother would bring you, but you were one of the better students. The ones that we really should have had never take the time to come to school and meet you or talk to you about their son or their daughter. But I had a wonderful relationship with my students, wonderful. In 42 years, I only sent 2 youngsters to the principal's office. And that's all. Oh, never had a bad boy. Never had a bad boy. Never had a bad athlete. Somehow or other, there was just a relationship there. It was just one of those things. I can't explain it to you. I like the kids. I miss the kids. But I have no idea what's bringing this about. It is absolutely terrible what's happening. You know that as well as I do.
I agree.
Well, Elwood always was very strict. He was a strict teacher. And he always laid the law down the first day of the classroom. And you know, you had some kids that you maybe felt like throwing out of the room, but he cautioned them that the door was always open. But I think it's just, again, lack of discipline.
Yeah.
We don't have it.
I see the kids in Wittenberg currently demanding the resignation of the dean of students. And they claim to be going through proper channels to achieve that. It's on the front page of the Torch. And they put the president on the spot, and they seem to enjoy doing that. But he very carefully has said, you'll not get an answer from me until next fall. I don't answer quickly. But it's a tough spot to put the dean of students' picture out on the front of the torch and say, we demand her resignation. I don't want any part of it. I'm glad I am no longer a university administrator.
Well, I said to Betty just this morning, I said, being local like we are, I said, I never thought I'd ever see the day come in which they'd have a situation like they had happen at Wittenberg the other day. Not in my life. I remember when I went in, when I was president of the Bruce W. Association, I can remember when I went in and asked President Tillis at that time if we could have a dance on the campus. I was head of Bruce W. And was a member of the Interfraternity Council and so forth. And I was turned down.
You were?
Yeah, I noticed that.
For what reason?
At that time, things were very strict. Very strict. You couldn't smoke, couldn't drink, couldn't screw or anything else on the Wittenberg campus. Just that plain and simple. You were out. Excuse me. I sat in his office. Don't record this.
Oh, yeah.
Don't record this. And I don't know. I've had people ask me what's occurring here. I really don't have an answer for it. But I think could be better home conditions.
Well, when a teacher can't even hug a child,
Isn't that pitiful?
it's pretty pitiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know I had a mother tell me not too long ago that her little girl cried because she loved this teacher so much, and waited for her hug each day, and now she can't even put her hand on it. And that's sad.
For several years, I did reading at Emerson School to first graders. I had to give it up because they were doing this so much and wiping it on their books, and I was getting too many colds. But I saw those lovable kids without much parental supervision at all.
Well,
And-
just didn't have the guidance.
And things were so bad at Emerson that 60% of the students turnover in 1 year because their parents had to move. They paid down their rent for 1 month, wouldn't pay it the second. They'd get kicked out on the third or fourth month, and they'd get free rent for 2 months. And the condition of the homes on Liberty Street, right out of Emerson School, it looks like desolation. Pitiful. Okay, what was the manner of public transportation when you were growing up in Springfield?
Well, I can well remember
Okay.
streetcars down there in Magunda where I came from. I can well remember that. I can well remember right across from Washington School where they had a fire station. And if there was a fire in those days, they would open up the doors and out would come the horses. And we as youngsters would run to the windows to watch them go down Magunda Avenue. That was quite a thrill. But I well remember the streetcar situation, people in this day and age. Some of the younger people wouldn't realize it. But I can well remember that if a lady wanted to get on a streetcar, all the men would allow her to go first so they could see her knee if she had to pull her dress up. I can well remember that. I can well remember that. We thought that was terrible. We thought that was awful. But here we are, sitting here with Betty. She went to Snyder Park School, and that was out in the country at that time. She walked.
On what street?
And the Maiden Lane.
She,
Before Maiden Lane was cut through.
where Snyder Park School is today, all that area through there was nothing but fields.
Didn't even have a sidewalk.
And everybody, well, yeah, that's right. And people thought that the Board of Education in those days was doing the wrong thing, which is to be expected. But I lived,
I mean, in urban, we used to have to, the fans would go to Bateman,
oh yeah,
all
on
along.
traction cars,
Traction
to
cars.
see the basketball team
Yeah.
play Ohio Westwood, we go down to Dayton on the traction car to see us play University of Dayton, University of Cincinnati. But,
Where does the traction lines run? From Columbus to Dayton? And from somewhere north to
well,
Cincinnati?
they ran DT&I, Dayton, Toledo, and,
Well, we had interurban to Urbana, we could go to Urbana, on the interurban. There was tracks right by the road. And to Dayton, we would leave here at from the station here, and they'd go into Dayton and right up to the field house, north out the field house.
Mhm.
All those.
Could you go to Columbus
Yeah.
on the interurban?
oh, sure, oh, sure.
Yeah.
Track train rides, mostly right alongside the highway, then, weren't
Yes.
they? I mean, you could see the interurban from the
Of course,
highway.
they were dirt roads in those days,
Yeah,
but,
interurban,
no different than Hammond, Indiana,
Mhm. That's right.
no different.
We were probably a little more industrialized, being a neighbor to Chicago and being in the area of steel mills. It was a big, booming business in those days.
But I remember that my grandmother took me to South Bend, Indiana, on traction cars,
That's so.
trains.
Yeah.
I remember that as a youngster.
That was a big adventure.
Oh, yeah. I remember one time I was a senior in high school in which I was working after school, and I drove international harvester trucks, drove automobiles through as a senior in high school. We did this. I got $10, and I'd go to these different companies, walk in, I have my envelope with me. I drove for Springfield Central Sales. I'd take that envelope in, give it to them, and my car would come out on a track, and I'd get in that car and drive here to Springfield. And they had a, what did they call that? Can't think of the name of it. Governor. On there, you go 25 mile an hour. 25 mile an hour. No air conditioning, no nothing.
No.
That's just the way it was. At 25 mile an hour, that's the limit. But I drove international trucks through, automobiles through, $10. That was good.
How would you get transportation back?
When I'd take them and go,
Yeah.
interurban, yeah. I'd go from here from here and right up to Lima, change at Lima, go to Fort Wayne, Indiana. Get a truck, start out from there.
Hmm.
Imagine, in this day and age, would you ever want a youngster going to the plant and driving your automobile back? No way.
How old were you when you started that?
What was that, 15? About 15.
No license.
No license, none whatsoever. And I had good success.
Oh. What else did you do for earning a side living?
Well, I worked at Farrow and McCann's drugstore at the corner of High Street and Center Street.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I interviewed George McCann recently and he mentioned your name.
Oh, he did? He did? Well, that was a wonderful job I had as a youngster, cleaning up and cleaning out the mixing bowls and delivering medicine here and there. Wonderful experience. Mr. McCann was a brilliant pharmacist. Farrow likewise, but their personalities were entirely different. McCann would yell, shout, carry on like a crazy man. But Mr. Farrow was very quiet, unassuming. But then I worked inserting funnies in the newspapers. Every Saturday night, they had $1.25 a night.
Okay, continue.
Back in those days when I was working at the drugstore,
Mm-hmm.
we'd always come in on a Saturday morning early, and you get the dust rags out and the mops out, and we'd clean up the drugstore for the start of the day. And this particular day we were up, they had a soda fountain up in the front part of the drugstore there. And we would always sample some of their ice cream or their milkshakes or this or that before Farrow or McCann would come on the scene. And this particular time, why, a fellow named of Ed Sellers said, you know what? He says, I think I can take that ice, what do you call it, scoop or scoop, flip that ice cream up there and going through that ceiling fan while it's going. And we ask kids, you know, hell you can, this and that. So up it goes. Out he gets it. He catches it just beautifully. I don't know how it was ever done. So we always got on it. Real lucky, this and that. So on the second try, you can imagine what we were doing. We were running here, running there, running there. That ice cream hit that fan and just made a circle right around that drugstore down there. Well, he would have fired, if McCann had come in, he'd have fired all of us. But I also, get back to Jim Rhodes, Jim came down there and helped to insert funny papers on a Saturday night. And we would always take a few extra copies over to the Big Four station. Then when the train would pull in, we'd get on the train and try to sell those papers to make some extra money for ourselves, which we did do.
How much?
We didn't make, I don't recall anymore what they.
What did you charge for the paper?
That's just what I was going to say. I don't recall it.
5 to 10 cents.
Well, 5 or 10 cents, something like that. But we thought that was great.
Was this the News or the Sun?
Well, it was looked upon at that time as the Sun, I would say. There was 2 newspapers at that time. There was the Springfield Daily News, and then there was the Springfield Sun. And the Springfield Daily News was on Washington Street, right off of Limestone Street, on the left-hand side. The Sun paper was northwest of the Hotel Shawnee there on the corner, to the left, right where the parking garage is. Mm-hmm. Now, that's where the Sun paper was.
George said in his interview that his father was a very strict disciplinarian. I guess he was tough.
That's what I say. He was very tough, a brilliant man.
Yeah.
Yep.
George also said that he delivered sandwich lunches in the Tecumseh building to a couple of doctors there, and they had sandwiches and a drink, and the total bill for 2 of them was $1.
I can believe that.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
I saw a recent statement as to what has happened to the dollar in value and purchasing power since I retired in 75. To get the equal salary of what I was then getting would be 3.1 times what I was then getting to equal my living ability today.
Yeah.
Pitiful. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'll tell you something else
Go ahead.
that you don't know about me,
All right.
that I didn't mention. With my athletic ability, I was afforded a 4-year scholarship to play basketball at the University of Kansas. Paul Gallen was the athletic director and coach at the University of Kansas at that time. And they took me into their home to live. They had 4 children. And I would get up in the morning and help fix breakfast for the kids and get them off to school. And then I would do my dishes and get my bed made and so on and so forth, and I would go to school. But I was in love, no question about it. There she sits right there. But I had never been away from home for any period of time. So I was one of those kids who got a feeling that I should come back home here.
What year was this?
Semester. He was there first semester, and then he came back and
What
wrote
do you
third.
call it? Sickness?
Homesickness?
Homesick.
Yeah.
That's what brought me back here. And
So you went there directly from high school?
directly, what they did is that they sent for me to come out to their school and spend a week with them. So I went in to see E.W. Tiffany, who was principal at Springfield High School at that time, and I asked permission to go. And he afforded me the opportunity to go. They paid all my expenses, everything. I mean, the University of Kansas did. I lived there with the Allens, Mother Ellen, I always called her Mother, because at that time, she was just like a mother to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to come on back home. So that's how I got in Wittenberg. Wittenberg wanted me. University of Kansas wanted me, too.
Mm-hmm.
But I always regretted that. But I had Dr. Allen, he was a doctor, had Dr. Allen come here and speak at one of our athletic banquets. And he said in his remarks that, he said, if I had known that Betty was influenced on this, he said, I'd have brought her to Kansas too. But anyway, why, that's...
Well, he went out in high school. It was the time of Kansas relays. That's when they had him out that week.
Yeah, they gave me the businesses, so to speak.
Have you ever evaluated the respective sports, which one you enjoyed the most?
Basketball will naturally be. And then baseball. Always liked track.
See?
And I always liked tennis.
There's
Still
4 already.
I've still got my Bancroft tennis racket up there in my bedroom, sitting there. But I'd say basketball.
Uh-huh.
I've been fortunate to have a real good life. Of course, there comes a time when we all have to leave, but I met up with some wonderful fellows, and then there's some fellows that I met up with that I do not want to be around them.
You just soon pass that by, huh?
Well, I'll tell you, my first experience was in a spring training situation. I can remember, you may remember his name too. His name was Scarcella. He was a first baseman for Cincinnati Reds. But he was from Oakland, California. And what they did at the training table, they had all this food for you. You'd practice in the morning, then you'd come in the evening, you'd practice in the afternoon. And at the first sitting that we had, I can well remember they brought in a platter, I don't know, must have been like this, and just had pork chops stacked on there. And we always called him a wop. But Scarcella sat right across from me, and he just took his fork and just pushed all the pork chops off on his plate and set it back down. And he wasn't too well liked. He was a good ball player, a nice guy, but he had his problems. But he played for Cincinnati for, I think, 2 years, and then they got rid of him. But I've had some wonderful experiences.
How would you contrast the modern game of basketball in college with what you did?
Well, you see, at my age, I could look back and think of the game of basketball as it started, and having the opportunity to meet and know Dr. Naismith, who invented the game of basketball. He would come down to our house there in Lawrence, Kansas, and sit and talk with Fogg at nighttime occasionally. And so I had an interest in the game of basketball before I ever met Dr. Naismith. But anyway, I am old enough to remember when the game was played at Memorial Hall between Denison University and Wittenberg, in which they decided at that time that they should do something with this matter of dribbling the ball all the time right to the run out of the game at the end of the game. So that's when Livingston from the University of Denison decided to take and have a line across mid-court, as you now have it nowadays. That came about from Livingston here at Denison University. He was the one that brought that about. But I had good experiences. Well, I never particularly cared for that center jump, the way they work it nowadays. I would a lot rather have them come and use the center jump once again, like they did originally. That change of the mid-court line, I was playing with the College All-Stars in San Francisco in 1935, and I remember when they had that line, they just brought it in to experiment with it. That was new to us, because after you would shoot down there, you just turn around and come back to center jump, load it up. But they'd take the ball out of bounds, like you have it nowadays. And we'd turn around and they'd go down that court right past us, because we'd been so used to going back to center jump. But, I remember I played a ball game, a professional game in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in which there were no out of bounds. We had a net all the way around that basketball court. You never had a ball go out of bounds. And at the time we got through with that ball game, we decided that was too much.
I never heard of that one.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Well, first, remember the ball you played with it? What was the first one that you ever saw shoot?
They talk about athletes and their shooting, as they do. This fellow's name was Moody, Taft Moody, from the University of Arkansas. He's 6'6", and he walked into our training program there at the Olympic Gymnasium there in San Francisco, and he was the first ball player I had ever seen that shot with the one hand. He was the first one. Oh, how he could shoot. Oh, he was wonderful. But we'd look at him and think, gee whiz, that's a crazy way to shoot a basketball.
Did you turn pro at any time?
Well, I turned pro, like I say.
You came back home here after that.
Oh yeah, basketball. Yeah, I turned pro.
John Dawson contacted me from Springfield last year. About this NBC, the National Basketball Conference.
Well, I got a telephone call here, and
When?
last year.
It was before, it was long about the first of the year, about January and February, so they were recognizing the players who had played in the National Basketball Conference, which preceded the NBA. The NBA didn't start until 1945, after the war. And so they were trying to find these athletes who had played in professional ball prior to that. And Elwood started the first year with the athletic supply team in Columbus, and that was a professional team in the National Basketball Conference. And you played in Dayton in the afternoon, and Columbus at night, Fort Wayne maybe in the middle of the week, and then have to come back to Detroit. They had a conference here. And so they asked him to send materials there, and of course we thought we didn't have anything, but he did come up with a picture of the team, a picture of himself in uniform, and just a few things. In those days, they didn't have a very fancy anything in the bleachers, or to advertise or anything. But he played about 3 years, I think, with them. But they had him send those things there, and then they said, invite us to the opening dinner, which was in May, and he was ill at that time, and we couldn't go. So we still have to go up there and see what they have, but they put everything on display of all the
Where
things
is
we could
it?
reach at Springfield, Massachusetts Hall of Fame. And so this is the first time, though, that this past year they recognized those who played before the NBA. And, of course, just like Elwood said, there weren't too many left, just like the players he played with.
Right.
Yeah, we are getting old, aren't
Bill
we?
Hoskins,
Yes, we are, all three of us.
Bill Hoskins in Columbus, his dad was, we always traveled together. I mean, one or the other would drive, and we'd go with the Hoskins back and forth. And he was one of the first players. Of course, he's been gone for a number of years now. And there's no one living except Elwood of the team that he played with. So.
Well, I can add this from the experience I've had in the many years that I've been in Springfield. I have always heard good things said about Elwood.
Well, I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so, but I'm just an ordinary individual.
Yeah, but you're one that has avoided being crass. You know, in the athletics, there has been so much commercialism today that it has really burned me up to see the high levels that go down to the dollar. You've always been given credit for good leadership to boys.
Well, I hope so. I have always tried to be.
Yeah.
And I hope they respect me now that they're a little bit older. And I think they do. And of course, there's some people that don't like you.
Oh, yeah.
See? And there's some people that don't like me.
Yeah.
But that's life.
Right.
But I've always tried to be a good, clean, wholesome individual with my life, and I think I have Betty there to stand by me.
And you think that all the thing that we've enjoyed, and I know Elwood has, and I have too, is the fact that they still contact him. They still come here, they visit, they call him on the phone. He had a call last night from well, he's no kid anymore, he's 75. Lives in Florida, and he just called up, said, I was looking through the yearbook and saw it here, and decided to call you up. And of course, the fellows that have played for him still contact him all.
Barb, I had to cut it off at this point quite abruptly, so please add the following words. Well, Elwood, we've come to the end of our tape, at least for now, period. I am sorry that we did not have time to include your 4 years in the Navy, and trust that you will add it to this when you and Betty do the editing, period. In conclusion, it was a happy experience to see you bouncing back, find your profession so good, period. You, indeed, have been a fine citizen for our community and particularly for our schools and our young people, period. End of dictation. Thank you.